What happens when one of Hollywood's most fearless stars walks onto a live talk show stage, and the interview suddenly turns into something no one expected? Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to the Truth Narrator, like this video, and comment below, because stories like this don't happen often, and you don't want to miss what comes next. The lights inside the studio were bright, almost blinding, reflecting off the polished floor and the famous round table where so many unforgettable conversations had happened before. The audience was excited that day. You could feel it in the air, a quiet buzz of anticipation that filled every corner of the room. This wasn't just another celebrity interview. This was Robert Downey Jr., a man whose life story was as dramatic as any movie he had ever starred in. As he walked out onto the stage, the audience erupted into applause. Not the polite kind, the real kind. The kind that comes from people who feel like they know you. He smiled, waved, calm and confident, the way someone does when they've spent decades in the public eye and have nothing left to prove. He sat down at the table across from Joy Behar, who was already watching him carefully, her notes placed neatly in front of her. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that suggested this interview was going to be more than just friendly conversation. The introductions were warm, the kind the audience expected. They talked about movies, about success, about how his career had changed over the years. Robert answered calmly, occasionally making the audience laugh with his quick wit. He was charming, relaxed, in control. But Joy wasn't there just to talk about movies. And everyone in the room could feel it. There was a moment, a small one, where Joy glanced down at her notes, then back up at Robert. Her expression changed slightly. Not rude, not aggressive, just serious. "So," she said, crossing her hands lightly on the table, "you've had one of the most remarkable comeback stories in Hollywood." Robert nodded once. "I've been very lucky," he said. "Some people would call it luck," Joy replied. "Others would call it second chances, and not everyone gets those." The audience shifted slightly. It was a subtle change, but it was there. The conversation had just taken its first serious turn. Robert didn't react defensively. He simply nodded again. "That's true," he said calmly. "Not everyone does." Joy leaned forward slightly. "Why do you think that is?" It wasn't an attack, but it also wasn't a simple question. Robert paused for a moment, thinking. The room was quiet now. "I think," he said slowly, "that sometimes people are defined by their worst moments. And sometimes they're given the chance to redefine themselves." The audience murmured softly. They liked that answer. Joy tilted her head slightly. "And do you think Hollywood is fair in the way it decides who gets that chance and who doesn't?" There it was. The first real tension point. Robert smiled, but this time, it wasn't just a polite smile. It was the smile of someone who understood exactly what was happening. "I don't think the world is fair," he said. "Not just Hollywood." A few people in the audience clapped quietly. Joy didn't smile this time. "But the world also watches Hollywood," she said. "Which means the choices made there send a message." Robert leaned back slightly in his chair, still calm, still composed. "What kind of message do you think it sends?" he asked. Now the audience was completely silent. They were watching a conversation turn into something else, something deeper, something more personal, something more real. Joy answered carefully. "That some people can make mistakes and be forgiven," she said. "And others make mistakes and are forgotten." The words hung in the air. Robert looked at her for a moment, studying her expression, as if trying to understand not just the question, but the intention behind it. "That's not just Hollywood," he said quietly. "That's life." Joy responded immediately. "But Hollywood has a microphone. A very loud one." The audience reacted softly again, a few nods, a few whispers. Robert leaned forward now, resting his hands lightly on the table. His voice was still calm, but there was more weight behind it now. "I can't speak for Hollywood," he said. "I can only speak for myself." Joy nodded once. "All right," she said. "Then let's talk about you." And somehow, the way she said it made the entire room feel even quieter than before. "Do you think you deserve the second chance you got?" she asked. The question landed heavily. You could actually hear someone in the audience gasp quietly. It was a bold question. The kind of question most hosts don't ask directly. The kind of question that can either create a powerful moment or a very uncomfortable one. Robert didn't answer immediately. He looked down for just a second, then back up. And when he spoke, his voice was steady. "No," he said. The audience froze. Joy blinked, clearly not expecting that answer. "No," she repeated. "No," Robert said again. I don't think anyone deserves a second chance. The room was completely silent now. I think, he continued, a second chance is something you earn after you get it. That line changed the energy in the room instantly. Some people in the audience started clapping, slowly at first. Then more joined in. Joy watched him carefully, her expression now more curious than confrontational. So you believe you earned it, she said. Robert shook his head slightly. I believe I'm still earning it, he replied. That answer hit differently. You could feel it, because it wasn't defensive. It wasn't arrogant. It was honest. Joy leaned back slightly, studying him again, as if recalculating where the conversation was going to go next. But she wasn't finished. Not even close. She looked back down at her notes one more time, then looked up at him and said, Let's talk about responsibility. And at that moment, everyone in the studio knew. This interview was no longer just a conversation. It was about to become a confrontation. The word responsibility seemed to hang in the air the moment Joy Behar said it, and the entire studio of The View felt different again. Quieter, tighter, like everyone could sense the conversation was about to go somewhere deeper, somewhere more uncomfortable. Across the table, Robert Downey Jr. didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked like he had been expecting this moment from the very beginning. He sat back slightly in his chair, one hand resting on the table, the other loosely folded, his expression calm but focused. Joy leaned forward just a little. You said you're still earning your second chance, she began. That implies responsibility. Not just for your career, but for your influence. Millions of people watch you, listen to you, admire you. Do you ever feel pressure to be a role model? The audience was silent again, listening carefully. Robert smiled slightly, but it wasn't a joking smile. It was the smile of someone choosing his words very carefully. I feel pressure to be a decent human being, he said. That's about as far as I go with it. A few people in the audience chuckled softly, but Joy didn't laugh. But you are a role model, she said, whether you choose to be or not. Robert nodded once. That's probably true, he admitted. So what does that responsibility look like to you? Joy asked. Robert paused for a moment, then answered slowly. It means trying not to lie, he said, especially about who you are. The audience reacted quietly, a few nods, a few murmurs. Joy tapped her pen lightly on the table. Not everyone would agree that's enough, she said. Robert looked at her. It's a start, he replied. The tension was building again, but it wasn't loud. It was controlled, like a conversation where both people were choosing their words carefully, but neither one was backing down. Joy crossed her hands on the table. Some people look at your story, she said, and they see redemption. Others look at your story, and they see someone who made serious mistakes and still ended up on top. Do you understand why that can be frustrating for some people? The audience shifted slightly again. Robert didn't get defensive. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. Yes, he said. I do. Joy seemed slightly surprised by how quickly he answered. You do? She asked. Yes, Robert said. Because if I was watching my story from the outside, I might feel the same way. That answer created a wave of murmurs through the audience. Joy leaned forward again, clearly more engaged now. So you admit the system isn't fair? Robert shrugged slightly. I think life isn't fair, he said again. But I also think fairness isn't something you wait for. It's something you try to create where you can. Joy tilted her head slightly. That sounds good, she said. But it also sounds a little philosophical. A few people in the audience laughed quietly. Robert smiled. I've had a lot of time to think, he said. That line got a bigger laugh, and even Joy smiled slightly this time. But she moved quickly back to the point. Let me ask you something more direct, she said. The audience quieted again immediately. Do you think celebrities get treated differently when they make mistakes? Robert didn't hesitate this time. Yes, he said. And is that fair? Joy asked. No, Robert said. The audience reacted again, louder this time. Joy raised her eyebrows slightly. So you benefited from something unfair, she said. Robert nodded slowly. Probably, he said. That answer hit the room in a very different way. Because he didn't argue. He didn't deny it. He didn't try to explain it away. He just accepted it. Joy studied him carefully, as if trying to figure out whether he was being honest or just very good at handling difficult interviews. And what do you do with that knowledge? She asked. Robert leaned forward slightly now, his voice calm but more serious than before. You try to help someone else get a second chance too, he said. The audience applauded immediately. Not wildly, but sincerely. Joy nodded slowly. Have you done that? She asked. Robert looked at her and said, yes. He didn't elaborate. He didn't list examples. He didn't try to turn it into a speech. And somehow, that made the answer feel more real. Joy watched him for a moment, then asked quietly, do you ever worry that people are just waiting for you to make another mistake? The question was sharp, personal, unexpected. The audience went completely silent again. Robert didn't look shocked, but he did take a moment before answering. Yes, he said. That thought never completely goes away. The room was so quiet now you could hear someone cough in the back row. But, he continued, you can't live your life trying not to fall. You live your life trying to walk forward. That line hit hard. A few people in the audience actually said, wow, under their breath. Joy didn't interrupt this time. She just listened. I spent a lot of years, Robert continued, being the example of what not to do. If my life now can be an example of what is possible, then maybe that's worth something. The audience started clapping again, louder this time. Joy let the applause happen, then leaned forward one more time. But redemption stories are very popular, she said. People love a comeback. Do you ever worry that the story becomes more important than the truth? That question changed the energy again, because now she wasn't just talking about his past. She was talking about his image, his brand, his story. Robert looked at her carefully. That's a very good question, he said. The audience leaned in again. Because yes, he continued, sometimes people like the story so much, they forget there's a real person inside it. Joy didn't speak. Neither did the audience. And the real person, Robert said quietly, is not a headline. Not a comeback story. Not a headline about failure either. The real person is just someone who wakes up every day and tries to do a little better than they did the day before. The silence after that line was different. It wasn't tense. It was heavy, emotional, real. Joy looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, you're very good at answering difficult questions. Robert smiled slightly. I've had a lot of practice, he said. The audience laughed again, breaking the tension for a moment. But Joy wasn't done. She looked at him, her expression serious again, and said, all right, then let me ask you the question that a lot of people probably want to ask you. But don't. The audience went completely still again. Robert didn't move. Joy leaned forward slightly and said, what's the one thing from your past that you wish people would stop bringing up? And what's the one thing you hope they never forget? And just like that, the interview reached another turning point. For a moment after the question, the studio of The View felt like it had frozen in time. The audience wasn't moving, the cameras were locked in place, and across the table, Robert Downey Jr. sat very still, looking at Joy Behar as if weighing not just the question, but the meaning behind it. What's the one thing from your past that you wish people would stop bringing up? And what's the one thing you hope they never forget? It wasn't a small question. It wasn't a funny question. It was the kind of question that opens doors people usually keep locked. Robert looked down for a moment, his fingers lightly touching the table. Then he leaned back and exhaled slowly. When he looked back up, his expression had changed slightly. He wasn't smiling now. He looked thoughtful. Serious. I wish people would stop bringing up the mugshots, he said calmly. The audience reacted with a soft murmur. Not laughter, not shock, just recognition. Everyone knew what he meant. And not because they didn't happen, he continued. They happened. They were real. They were consequences. I earned those. Joy didn't interrupt. She just listened. But those pictures, Robert said, they freeze a person in the worst moment of their life, and they pretend that moment is the whole story. The room was completely silent again. And it's not, he said quietly. Joy nodded slightly. So what do you hope people don't forget? She asked. Robert paused again, but this time his answer came a little faster. That people can change, he said. A few people in the audience started clapping softly. But he kept talking. Not because it sounds nice, he said. Not because it makes a good movie. But because it's necessary. If people couldn't change, then what would be the point of trying? The applause grew louder now, but there was still a serious tone in the room. This wasn't just a feel-good moment. It felt like something more honest than that. Joy leaned forward slightly again. Do you think everyone deserves that chance to change? She asked. Robert nodded immediately. Yes, he said. No exceptions? Joy asked. Robert thought for a moment. I think everyone deserves the chance, he said. But not everyone chooses to take it. The audience reacted again, a mix of nods and quiet murmurs. Joy tapped her pen lightly again, then asked, "Do you think fame made your second chance easier or harder?" Robert smiled slightly at that question. "Both," he said. Joy raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "When you fail in public," Robert said, "you fail in front of the whole world. But when you try to come back, you also come back in front of the whole world." The audience was very quiet now, listening to every word. "So the pressure is bigger," he continued. "The judgment is louder. But the opportunity can also be bigger." Joy nodded slowly. "That sounds like a very heavy thing to carry." Robert shrugged slightly. "It's lighter than some of the things I used to carry," he said. That line made the audience react immediately. Some laughter, some applause, but also a sense that he meant it. Joy smiled slightly, but then her expression turned serious again. "You speak very openly about your past now," she said. "But there was a time when you didn't want to talk about it at all." Robert nodded. "That's true. What changed?" Joy asked. Robert thought for a moment, then said, "I realized that if I didn't tell my story, someone else would tell it for me. And they wouldn't tell it the right way." The audience reacted again, louder this time. "So I decided," he continued, "that if my story was going to be told, I should be the one telling it. The good parts and the bad parts." Joy looked at him carefully. "And what is the right way to tell that story?" she asked. Robert leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but firm. "The right way," he said, "is to not pretend you were a hero in your own story when you weren't." The audience clapped immediately, a strong reaction. Joy nodded slowly. "That's a very honest answer," she said. Robert smiled slightly. "Honesty is usually the safest answer," he replied. The audience laughed again, breaking the tension for a moment. But Joy leaned forward one more time, her tone now quieter, more serious than at any point before. "Do you ever think," she asked, "that people forgive celebrities faster than they forgive normal people?" The question hit hard. The audience went silent again. Robert didn't answer immediately this time. He looked down for a moment, then back up. "Yes," he said quietly. "Sometimes they do." Joy watched him closely. "Why do you think that is?" Robert thought for a long moment before answering. "Because people don't actually know celebrities," he said. "They know the version they see on a screen." The room was completely still again. "And it's easier to forgive a character," he continued, "than it is to forgive a real person who hurt you in real life." That line hit the room like a wave. You could hear people reacting quietly, soft "yeah," and that's true coming from the audience. Joy didn't interrupt. She just let him speak. "So in some ways," Robert said, "celebrities live in a strange world where millions of people feel like they know you, but very few people actually do." Joy nodded slowly. "That sounds lonely," she said. Robert smiled slightly, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was an honest one. "It can be," he said. There was a long pause after that. A real pause. The kind that doesn't feel like dead air, but like a moment where everyone is thinking about what was just said. Then Joy asked one last question, her voice calm but very direct. "After everything you've been through," she said, "what scares you the most now?" The audience went completely still again, because everyone could feel it. This wasn't just another question. This was the question that would define the entire interview. Robert looked at her, his expression thoughtful, serious, and very, very honest. And he said, "Wasting the time I was given to start over." The room fell into complete silence. The silence after that answer didn't feel like the earlier silences. Earlier, the quiet in the studio of The View was filled with tension, with the feeling that something could go wrong at any moment. But this silence was different. It was heavy, reflective, almost emotional. The audience wasn't just watching anymore. They were thinking. Across the table, Joy Behar looked at Robert Downey Jr. for a long moment, as if she was deciding whether to push one last time or let the moment be what it was. "Wasting the time I was given to start over," she repeated quietly. Robert nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "That's the one thing that really scares me." Joy leaned back slightly in her chair, her expression softer now, less confrontational and more thoughtful. "Most people are scared of losing what they have," she said. "You're scared of wasting what you got back." Robert gave a small smile. "Because I know what it's like when it's gone," he said. The audience reacted with quiet murmurs, not loud applause, not laughter, just understanding. Joy looked down at her notes, then back up again. "Do you ever feel like you have to be perfect now?" she asked. Robert shook his head immediately. "No," he said. "Perfection is not the goal. Progress is." That line hit the audience hard. Several people started clapping right away. "Perfection is impossible," he continued. But progress is something you can work on every day. Joy nodded slowly. That's a very different way of looking at life than the way Hollywood usually presents it, she said. Robert smiled slightly. Hollywood sells perfection, he said. But real life is mostly about fixing mistakes. The audience laughed softly, then applauded again. Joy folded her hands on the table. If you could go back and talk to your younger self, she asked, the version of you before all the mistakes, before all the consequences, what would you tell him? The question felt like the final question. The kind of question that closes a conversation, not opens a new one. Robert didn't answer immediately. He looked down for a moment, then back up, and when he spoke, his voice was calm but filled with emotion. I would tell him that being talented is not enough, he said. And being famous is not important. And being right all the time is not the goal. The audience was completely silent again. I would tell him, Robert continued, that the people who love you are more important than the people who applaud you. And that if you don't learn that early, life will teach it to you the hard way. The room was so quiet now that his voice seemed louder than before, even though he wasn't speaking loudly at all. Joy didn't interrupt. No one did. And I would tell him, Robert said, that second chances are not a reward. They're a responsibility. The audience started clapping slowly, then louder again until the entire studio was filled with applause. Joy nodded slowly, clearly affected by the answer. That might be the most honest answer we've heard on this show in a very long time, she said. Robert smiled slightly. Honesty is easier, he replied. You don't have to remember anything. The audience laughed through the applause, and for the first time since the interview started, the tension was completely gone. But the story didn't end in that studio. Because later that day, clips from the interview started appearing online. Short clips at first, the big moments, the powerful lines, the quiet pauses that said more than words. Second chances are not a reward. They're a responsibility. If you don't learn what matters, life will teach you the hard way. I'm scared of wasting the time I was given to start over. Within hours, millions of people had watched those clips. Some people called it inspiring. Others called it brutally honest. Some people said it changed the way they thought about failure. Others said it changed the way they thought about success. News sites started writing headlines about the interview. Social media was full of debates, not angry debates, but real discussions. People talking about mistakes, about forgiveness, about whether people can really change, about whether the world really gives second chances, or whether some people just fight harder for them. And in the middle of all those conversations, one thing was clear. This interview hadn't gone viral because of shouting. It hadn't gone viral because of insults. It had gone viral because for once on live television, two people had a real conversation. Uncomfortable at times, direct at times, but honest the entire way through. Back in the studio, as the show wrapped up, Joy looked at Robert one last time and said, "You know, this conversation didn't go the way I expected." Robert smiled slightly. "Good," he said. "The best conversations usually don't." The audience applauded one last time as the cameras pulled back and the lights slowly dimmed. But now the conversation moves to you. Do you think people truly deserve second chances, no matter what their past looks like? Or do you think some mistakes should define a person forever? Comment your opinion below, because this is one of those questions where everyone has a different answer. And if you enjoy deep, dramatic, and powerful celebrity stories like this, make sure you subscribe to the Truth Narrator, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Because sometimes a single conversation can change the way people see everything.